Strike first. Strike hard. No mercy might be good enough for a group of karate bullies. But no one expects the Eagle Fang. I mean, mostly because eagles don't have fangs, but it's cool. Eagle Fang Karate and Miyagi-do Karate have had their hands full since Danny LaRusso's daughter came in contact with the rear bumper of none other than Johnny Lawrence. Johnny versus Danny is the classic 80s rivalry at the center of the best thing on the internet, Cobra Kai. Miyagi-do Karate has solved so many teenage rivalries, there are more karate bad guys from the Valley who could come back in Season 4. In a fantasy version of the San Fernando Valley in the 1980s, high school life was dominated by karate bullies, until a World War II vet turned chores into karate lessons. The Karate Kid distilled a martial arts movie into an American teenage movie and has become a beloved classic, with people debating whether that crane kick was really legal or how much of what happened really was Daniel-san's fault. The first season of Cobra Kai revolved around a reunion of Danny LaRusso and Johnny Lawrence, the rivalry that started it all. Only this time, Lawrence has fallen out with his rich stepfather and is working installation jobs, while Daniel has somehow managed to turn back-to-back regional youth karate tournament wins into a successful chain of car dealerships. Well, back-to-back regional youth karate tournament wins and a pretty sweet vintage car collection from his sensei. This time, however, we get to see things from Johnny's point of view, and while he's presented with a set of options, he still manages to make the worst one. You can see how he came to those horrible conclusions. Taken together, the Karate Kid saga and Cobra Kai stresses the importance of finding a good teacher. Daniel-san's sensei was the wise and charming Mr. Miyagi from Okinawa, Japan. Over time, we learned that he left Okinawa to avoid a death duel with a member of his dojo over a woman to only join the war effort for the United States, while his new wife died in an internment camp. Mr. Miyagi's story is really sad. Regardless, he taught Daniel-san Miyagi-do Karate, as well as life lessons about not being hot-headed. Mostly that. What Cobra Kai makes clear is that Danny and Johnny could easily have just been like the other, save for one push in one direction or another. For Johnny, that push came back at the end of the first season, in the form of another Karate Kid villain, Sensei Kreese, the living embodiment of the hardcore Vietnam vet archetype that permeated 80s movies. Kreese didn't walk away from love, refusing to reduce love to being a prize for a blood sport, nor did he lose his wife to the very country he was defending. But his time in war created a very different kind of sensei. His philosophy was simple enough to be stenciled on the walls of his strip mall dojo. Strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Kreese is probably fun at parties. Turns out that instead of teaching his students valuable life lessons,
I take good care of him.
He instead transferred all of his insecurities and fears and created a bunch of teenagers with advanced karate skills who treat modern high school life as a predatory jungle. The idea that Kreese might not have Johnny's best interests at heart wasn't something he discovered in Cobra Kai, however. In the opening of Karate Kid 2, we see Kreese breaking Lawrence's second-place trophy in half and being an all-around jerk until Mr. Miyagi introduces him to the idea of whimsy with a little nose honk. Johnny had gone through some changes himself and gained a new perspective in life, even if he still found himself butting heads with his teen rival LaRusso. So, when his former sensei returned, he figured he could share some of that new life perspective, introducing the fellas of the Karate Kid franchise to a new lesson. People have to want to change in order for them to change. Through flashbacks and some key scenes, we learn that Kreese was exaggerating about his current adventure-filled life and holding back about his time during war, meaning that he's a deeply damaged person, not in the sense of healing, but in the kind of validation you get from training an army of hot-headed teenage martial artists who call you sensei, eventually robbing Johnny of his own dojo. This creates a crazy three-way rivalry in the Valley between Kreese's newly usurped Cobra Kai, Miyagi-do, and Eagle Fang. Admit it, while we know that we probably should choose Miyagi-do, we all really want to join Eagle Fang. They have that bad news bears of the Valley youth karate community which apparently makes the news, it's so big. Johnny and Kreese aren't the only ones who had made life hard for young LaRusso to come back in his life in one way or another. A rival that Johnny happened to make without nary a Karate Kid being thrown had undercut his business by cutting a deal with the distributor responsible for LaRusso's Motors main brand. Turns out an ex-fling from LaRusso's time in Mr. Miyagi's hometown during Karate Kid 2 had an in at the distributor who was able to get LaRusso back in the Toyota business.
Honor have no time limit.
not before LaRusso reconciled with the rival he managed to make in his short time in Okinawa, Chosen. Chosen was not quite as hung up on his time with LaRusso as Lawrence was. So instead of having a complicated karate rivalry through his students like he was involved with in back home, Chosen instead did what Miyagi-do karate does best: teach a valuable lesson via learning a new technique. That's probably the hardest part of building the style of Miyagi-do, figuring out what life lesson goes with what move. Johnny has managed to reunite with some of his old punchy and kicky pals from his Cobra Kai days to find out that they have not been dwelling their time as an upperclassman in high school and instead have moved on to adult lives, including one of them even becoming a pastor. Perhaps the best part of that was the fact that Johnny didn't seem to think that was an option. With all the former villains of young LaRusso's life having come back to haunt him in his 40s, who else is waiting in the wings waiting to sort out the issues they had with a karate-kicking teenager? There were 3 movies and a spin-off, where a teenager's problems were solved with some kicking and folksy wisdom from Mr. Miyagi. Let's look at some of the Karate Kid movie villains who might still have some things to work out in the coming seasons. The best movies of the 1980s had no shortage of bad guys who delighted in being bad. Scene chewing was the order of the day, and everyone from Hans Gruber to Judge Doom delighted in their skullduggery with gleeful aplomb. It's as if they didn't just break bad to make money, but because they genuinely liked doing overly complicated things that made people suffer. None of these bad guys of the 80s movies took quite as much joy in being an unredeemable bad guy than Terry Silver. Silver was the complete package of unlikable. He was unspeakably rich. He was unspeakably rich because he owned a company that dumped toxic waste. Who knew that was so lucrative? He also sported the slicked-back black ponytail, which, outside Silver and 80s Steven Seagal, is generally considered the jerk henchman look. And honestly, Seagal and Silver don't really do much to redeem the look. He was the kind of guy who would take a bubble bath in what looked like a giant sink, with his secretary taking notes and yelling at people on the phone so that you knew he was a ruthless businessman. He's just so bad. We have seen some of Silver in the new series as a part of Kreese's flashbacks, where we now learned how Silver ended up in Kreese's debt. In The Karate Kid 3, Kreese turned to Silver to help enact his revenge on the 17-year-old who had the indecency to win a regional karate championship, and Silver jumped into the task with the type of giddy joy you haven't seen since getting a Nintendo for Christmas. He did it by posing as a concerned karate teacher who wanted to help LaRusso out with his new bully problem. Only there was a catch. Which brings us to Mike Barnes, the bad boy of karate. How does karate get bad boys? I don't know, but I spent enough of my Karate Kid-inspired youth reading Black Belt and Karate Magazine to know that if you have to come up with a whole magazine every month, you'll eventually find a bad boy of whatever it is. Did Joey Lawrence have an unseen arc where he became the bad boy of karate? Or was he peaking at the All-Valley Championship? While regional championships were clearly not going to be enough for the kid who could convert a couple of months of one-on-one training with Mr. Miyagi into a defeat over someone who has been training intensely for years. Clearly, those kids weren't learning enough life lessons from their techniques. Like his mentor Silver, Barnes dove into his role as foil to Daniel Russo with a disturbing amount of glee. Quasi-legal crane kicks were fine against a regional champ, but Barnes was a national competitor. So you'd have to give one complicated life lesson and move to LaRusso to overcome him. Barnes' job was to push LaRusso into defending the title that Mr. Miyagi had no interest in training Daniel-san for in a tournament he only entered to get the bullies to give him a break. Well, if bullies worked last time to get LaRusso to fight in the All-Valley, then bullies would work again. Did the defeat of a national karate competitor at the hands of a local champ in the San Fernando Valley change the trajectory of his career? Is he a mid-level marketing rep that keeps telling people he was almost on the U.S. Olympic team once? Is he a Kreese or a Johnny? There's one member of the Cobra Kai clan that didn't make it back to help Johnny process his past via reopening his old karate dojo, and he's missing for a reason as simple as it's frustrating. The actor who played him has given up acting and didn't feel like returning. It's a real shame, too, because of all of the toadies in the Cobra Kai gang, Dutch really seemed to have a sadistic streak to him. For the most part, the role of the various other members of the Cobra Kai squad were there to back Johnny's plays and throw in a few tags when it was time to intimidate or mess with LaRusso. Dutch's big move was the wide-eyed stare down before the All-Valley tournament that even weirded out the judge. Maybe he's just mad that he's an 80s teenager with a 1940s gangster movie name. Perhaps watching his former coworkers have so much fun might bring him out of retirement. In the context of Cobra Kai, he's the one who never really grew out of it, ending up in prison. Even if it's a short scene of Johnny visiting him in jail, might provide the contrast for which direction Johnny could have gone. If Dutch is too much of a bad guy name, enter Ned Randall. Ned Randall sounds like a reliable accountant or a sensitive guidance counselor. Danny LaRusso isn't the only lost kid with bully problems that Mr. Miyagi taught life lessons to, while also teaching them sweet karate moves. While attending a ceremony for his old unit, he returns to the wife of his former commander and karate student only to find her granddaughter has both anger and bully issues. Enter the Miyagi-do combination of karate and life lessons. Only this time, the student is Julie Pierce, and the bully is Ned Randall, who never graduated past the point of where he rubs dirt in the hair of the girl he likes. Perhaps he would be upset that Miyagi-do lives on. Colonel Dugan. As is the pattern in the Karate Kid/Cobra Kai cycle, the bad kid can usually be tracked back to a bad teacher, and Ned's teacher was terrible. While Kreese imposed his emotional damage on his teenage students, Colonel Dugan gave it a uniform and illusion of authority, running the school's hybrid security force and fraternity Alpha Elite. Putting kids in charge of security goes about as well as expected. Badly. That includes encouraging a rivalry based entirely on getting rejected for a date. Gross, dude. And forcing everything to come to a karate fight, his student gets beat up by the student's crush, and Dugan gets beat up by Mr. Miyagi. He would have some lingering issues with Miyagi-do karate. Bonus points, Dugan is played by Michael Ironside, and that's always a good time. There probably wouldn't be much baggage if the Valley kids had solved their problems at golf and stuff. You can still have colorful mentors. Mr. Miyagi taught someone to bowl blindfolded in the next Karate Kid. You just need to sort out what life lesson goes with that stupid windmill.